Time there could be some snow and it could be icy, and then things turn wet and windy into next week.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, another day of strikes as railway workers launch a fresh walkout after talks failed to resolve a bitter dispute over pay, job and conditions. 4 people sadly lost their lives this week in the Channel while making the dangerous crossing. This tragedy cannot repeat itself. PM Rishi Sunak has pledged this week to tackle illegal immigration and we'll discuss that. Plus, we have a special guest, the man behind some of the most iconic photos of the year. Chief Political Photographer of the Press Association, Stefan Russo, will take us through the political year in his pictures. All that, but give me your political briefing as well. Send in your views and emails opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews as well. But before all of that, let's have Rhiannon and the news.
Thank you, Arlene. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Passengers travelling by train are being disrupted by a fresh round of strikes. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, the RMT, have walked off the job for 48 hours. It's after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay and conditions. Services across the UK are severely disrupted, with no trains at all in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. Union leader Mick Lynch says little progress has been made during negotiations.
We exchanged some ideas and some possibilities. There was no negotiation at that, and there's nothing arising tangible out of that. But what he did, having heard that as the facilitator, as they described themselves, and the people that ultimately own the purse strings, was he invited us and requested that we get together and hold further talks going forward. And we'll do that in the next period if the companies want to get engaged on it.
A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 23 years for murdering his work colleague. Ross McCullum killed Megan Newborough at his parents' home in Colville in Leicestershire in August last year. He'd been dating the 23-year-old for less than a month. Her family said they're the ones serving the life sentence when he was convicted on Monday. 4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London.
Asked us to close the show. We apologize to you. This has nothing to do with us.
Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force their way into a concert. The suspected crush happened during a gig by Nigerian Afrobeat singer Asake. The Met Police has launched an investigation and plans to review CCTV images of the incident. The victims of a suspected triple murder in Northamptonshire have been named by police as Anju Asok and her 2 young children, Jiva and Janvi Saju. They were found with serious injuries at an address in Kettering yesterday morning. Police have confirmed the mother was an NHS nurse. A 52-year-old man is being questioned in connection with their deaths. Labour's Andrew Weston has become the country's newest MP, winning the Stretford and Urmston by-election. The Trafford Council leader secured 69% of the votes, but with only a 25% turnout in South Manchester. Mr Weston claims the victory shows people are giving up on the Tories. British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month. That's despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down by 0.4%. It follows a rise of 0.9% in October. The ONS says, though, department stores did report an increase in sales, with a long period of Black Friday offers helping. Ukraine claims Russia's planning a major ground offensive in the new year, with a second attempt to take the capital, Kyiv. The country's defence ministers warned the attack could happen as early as January, suggesting Russia's been preparing 300,000 more troops. It comes after strikes hit major cities across Ukraine, including Odessa in the south, Kharkiv in the north, and the capital. Kyiv says today's missile attack was the biggest since the start of the war. At least 21 people, including children, have been killed and around 12 are still missing after a landslide at a holiday campsite in Malaysia. It happened at a farm on the outskirts of the capital, Kuala Lumpur, last night as campers slept in their tents. Local media reports more than 90 people, including at least 30 children, had been camping at the base. Hundreds of rescuers are still searching for survivors. And a SpaceX rocket carrying a NASA satellite has successfully launched to study the Earth's water in depth for the very first time.
3, 2, 1, engine ignition and liftoff.
The Falcon 9 booster, owned by Elon Musk, is carrying a special satellite to conduct the first global survey of the Earth's surface water. It'll measure 90% of our water, from oceans to lakes and rivers, and it's hoped it'll shed new light on the long-term effects of climate change. Astrophysicist Dr. Magaliu told us this type of technology's never been sent to space before.
The plan is that it will investigate how water changes on our planet Earth. We know that the drop in the sea levels is related to climate change. So understanding the balance of water on the earth and where our water is going and how it's changing will allow us to assess climate change and the impact on our environment.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to the briefing with Arlene.
Welcome back to the show. Well, the strike chaos continues, and yesterday nurses walked out for the first time. Today sees real workers return to the picket lines, as well as highway staff, driving examiners and bus drivers. October resulted in the most working days being lost since November 2011. It's looking likely that December will surpass this. Well, joining me now from Birmingham New Street Station is GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson. Well, Jack, these strikes are really beginning to take a hold now in the run-up to Christmas. What's the feeling up there in Birmingham New Street at the moment?
Well, Arlene, the feeling amongst what we've had our team members here on the picket line, but we've also had obviously a lot of sort of commuters trying to go about their business. The feeling in Birmingham has always kind of been that they understand why the strikes. That a lot of Birmingham people here in Birmingham kind of support the strike action. Of course, we've had the GB News People's poll today, which said that 44% of people are in favour of these strikes, but you can't take away from the disruption that this causes. Here in Birmingham today, we've got real limited services. A lot of trains only running 1 per hour. Avanti West Coast running very, very few trains, and cross country the same. For West Midlands Railway and London North Western Railway services, they're just not operating at all and won't operate on further strike days as well. For the likes of local services like Lichfield, Trent Valley to Wolverhampton from here, like I said, only 1 an hour. And so the disruption here is continuing, and for a city like this, which a lot of people commute from here to London to do business, for work, as one of the youngest cities in the UK for education as well, this does have an impact on people, and it is the festive period as well. So you've got people trying to come and do their Christmas shopping, come and use the Christmas market here. For a place like Birmingham, a city like Birmingham, you know, they're a massive boost to the local economy here, and so these train strikes do have disruption, but that disruption is only because Vic Lynch saying these train operating companies, that Network Rail, aren't just meeting their demands, and they're not coming to the negotiating table with an offer that he thinks is acceptable. But he does say that, you know, that there is the chance there to negotiate. He says that resolutions to disputes are about compromises. He said we understand what the companies want and and they understand what we need. So we need some compromise on some of the conditions they're putting forward. For the picket line here that Network Rail, there are 2 members of Network Rail that were on the picket line here earlier today. Speaking to one of them, he told me that one of the things he had to reject the previous pay offer for was because of the conditions involved in it. He also raised concerns around how many train companies and trains now don't have guards on them, and so for those passengers that need help getting on the trains, off the trains, especially when you come to unmanned stations now, as there are so many around the UK, he said that was one of the problems that he just doesn't think are being taken seriously. And it wasn't just the pay offer that meant he had to reject that offer, but they are continuing to negotiate. Of course, Hugh Merriman, the rail minister, met with Mick Lynch yesterday. Not much of a solution came to that, but they are going to keep going around the negotiation table. But while there is no deal accepted, these disruptions are going to continue now in the coming weeks over Christmas and into the new year as well.
Jack, thank you very much. I'll let you get back into the warmth. It looks a bit cold up there in Birmingham, and hopefully we'll see you again later on during the output. Well, retail sales surprisingly fell by 0.4% in November. The expectation was that sales would increase, of course, thanks to Black Friday. Inflation remains high, with the latest figures showing a 10.7% inflation rate, putting a squeeze on shoppers' purchasing power in the run-up to Christmas. Shopping has now been further disrupted by the industrial action, which we've been just talking about. Well, joining me now to discuss the latest retail figures and the outlook for Christmas is consumer expert Kate Hardcastle. Kate, thank you so much for joining me. Were you disappointed with the figures from November, Kate, given that we do have Black Friday during those figures?
I think certainly a lot of the retailers were. I'm out with those retailers day in, day out, up and down the country and also internationally. And I think there was no surprise that whilst people were out looking for bargains, there was a different pattern to buy in this time. Some of the absolute go-to products were things like the energy-saving products, the heated air dryers, the electric blankets, air fryers. So things that people are probably saved for, waiting for a bargain. So they were holding off sales. And some of it was Christmas shopping brought earlier, trying to get a deal. So when you look into that, it's a movement actually of spend rather than an heightened spend. And that's what retailers have been facing all year. It's not surprising. We shop emotionally, and consumers are facing absolute predicament when they are trying to deal with and budget for escalating fuel prices and food prices. And as we do have those challenges, it isn't normal for people to feel comfortable or relaxed enough to go out then and perhaps buy non-essential items, or certainly a lot of additional goods.
And Kate, I was thinking about the postal strikes in particular, and the rail strikes, which might negate what I'm going to say. But in terms of the postal strike, obviously there's been a push towards online purchasing over the past couple of years. But I had thought that maybe because of the postal strike, more people would go out into the high street and purchase instead. Is there any evidence that that's happening over this past couple of weeks?
I think that's a really good point. And absolutely, we've seen a bit of bustle on the high street. And I think also to add to that, people haven't had the comfortable Christmas shopping environment for a good couple of years now. So I think people are taking advantage of that. They might not be going out to laden themselves with goods, but they want to sort of take part of the experience and the ambience. That said, weather's been a challenge, rail strike's been a challenge too. So that means that it's not always easy for everyone to be able to get into the high street. I know local towns and villages have experienced a bit of a flutter for independence, and we are so reliant on those small businesses for communities and trying to keep the money locally that I'm really pleased to hear from that. But being in the logistics warehouses and seeing some of the courier operators this week, there are plenty of other suppliers than Royal Mail, and there seems to be millions of parcels each day still going out there. So we're shopping, we're just doing it with moderation. And I think that just shows this sense and sensibility of the British public.
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself, how can we get more people to shop local, actually, and how can we get more people into our local towns and villages? But do you think there is a bit of a bustle around some of our local towns and villages, given that we have got these strikes going on?
May I get on my soapbox for a minute? We've had, I think, 10 high street ministers in 10 years, and no matter how good that person would have been enrolled, there's hardly any time for them to have made a difference. We've had high street report upon high street report. You know, what we need is a celebration of our brilliant nations and terms of the DNA that each place has to offer. And some of the work and remedy that's happened there is almost in spite of any of these reports. It's the good nature and the work and the passion of the people who are running the businesses and organisations there. But if you think about the roller coaster ride that those small businesses particularly have been on, they've dealt with COVID, they've dealt with the lockdowns, they've dealt with the challenge of price inflation and that appetite not being there from consumers because of the challenges of the cost of living crisis. I mean, they all deserve a medal as far as I'm concerned, that they actually keep that high street going. What we need is a human high street. We need toilet facilities. We need pavements that wheelchairs and prams can go on. I could talk about this all day, but we need that, because if we've also got an isolation crisis and a mental health crisis, we need to understand how important togetherness really is.
I really couldn't agree more. I think our high streets are critical, and it's not just about the shopping experience, it's about the living experience, it's about being able to go out at night time and enjoy the high streets as well. So we could talk about this all day, Kate, but thank you so much for joining us and talking about those retail figures. Thank you. Well, coming up, we'll be looking at the Prime Minister's plan to tackle the migration crisis. Don't go anywhere, but before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. It's been snowing heavily across some parts of Scotland. That is now starting to ease. For most, it is a dry and a cold day once more. Milder weather, though, is on the way, courtesy of an area of low pressure out in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, it's still cold. We've got high pressure, bringing most places a dry day today, but this low up to the northwest, and these weather fronts have introduced quite a bit of wet weather to western Scotland. Still snowing heavily across just to the north of the central belt, through the hills here, and elsewhere at lower levels turning more back to rain. But still, things could be quite icy, and still, as I say, some snow to come. Much of northern Scotland dry, the odd shower for northern parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, but for most it's dry, sunny and cold, with temperatures again struggling to get much above freezing. Now, as we go through the evening, we'll see more of this wet weather pushing into southern Scotland and then sinking southwards. Again, mostly rain at low levels, but some snow over the southern uplands, the Cumbrian mountains, and by the end of the night into parts of the Pennines as well. Further south, again, most places dry. Cold, once more, widespread hard frost. Southeast England, East Anglia, rural spots and northeast Scotland could get to negative double figures once more. So another cold day to come tomorrow, a cold Saturday with some wet weather over northern England and North Wales. Again, mostly at low levels this will be rain, but some snow over the hills and it could be icy. So just bear that in mind, especially on those trans-Pennine routes. More snow showers over the Highlands also. Elsewhere, much of the south and much of the east will be dry and bright on Saturday, but another cold day. That is about to change, though, because low pressure systems coming in from the southwest are going to mix things up through this weekend. Going to bring much milder air, certainly, but also going to bring some wet weather too. And as that wet weather hits the cold air initially, on Sunday, for a time, there could be some snow and it could be icy, and then things turn wet and windy into next week.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, this week the Prime Minister set out his 5-point plan to tackle the migration crisis across the Channel. The keystone of this plan is greater collaboration with Albania to deter Albanians from making the dangerous crossing. Less than 24 hours after Rishi Sunak set out his proposals in the House of Commons, a boat capsized in the Channel, resulting in the death of at least 4 migrants.
Simplest moral framing for this issue, one I believe members on all sides of this House believe in, is fairness. Mr. Speaker, it is unfair that people come here illegally. It is unfair on those with a genuine case for asylum when our capacity to help is taken up by people coming through and from countries that are perfectly safe. It is unfair on those who migrate here legally when others come here by cheating the system. And above all, it is unfair on the British people who play by the rules when others come here illegally and benefit from breaking those rules.
That's the Prime Minister there speaking about his migration policy, which he said was framed by the concept of fairness, and he discussed that in the House on Tuesday. Well, joining me to discuss the Prime Minister's plan and the latest developments is Conservative MP Marco Longhi. Marco, thank you for joining me. I mean, back in November, Marco, you were frustrated about this issue. You were saying that the Home Office was not dealing with the issues and, in fact, there was no political will. What did you make of the Prime Minister's plan on Tuesday?
Well, I actually spoke in the debate on the statement that the Prime Minister delivered on the day, and I have been clear that this is a strong statement that the Prime Minister has made. Having said that, we've had strong statements in the past. We've had various items of legislation in the past, and they have always ultimately been scuppered by our membership of the European Convention of Human Rights, which is enshrined in our law through the Human Rights Act. And until we deal with this, and whilst I continue hearing Prime Ministers or Secretaries of State, Home Secretaries coming along saying we need to legislate more, we need to legislate more, until I hear those words that tell me that legislation will not be frustrated in the future by lefty woke activists or by some judge in Brussels or Strasbourg or wherever, until we can therefore genuinely claim that as a sovereign nation we are in control of our borders and our laws, which is what Brexit was all about, I am not going to be completely convinced. So I want to thank the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary for their renewed focus on this. But I'm afraid that I'm in the I'll believe it when I see it territory.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Marco, yeah. And I think one of your colleagues actually put it to the Prime Minister, I think it was Sir Bill Cash, put it to him that this would mean an end to the ECHR. But of course, he sidestepped that in the Commons on Tuesday. And you will also know that there was a debate in the House of Lords on Friday past, led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, where he was saying something very different in relation to migrants and saying that the government had not dealt with it in any humane way. And in fact, I think the Prime Minister's speech on Tuesday was as much a reaction to that debate when he said it was a complex moral dimension in dealing with illegal migration. He was now attempting to do that. Do you accept, Marco, that there are voices from elsewhere that think that we are being too harsh in relation to migration?
In which case, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury should be looking at the numbers. Why is it that we have 55% acceptance rates of Albanians into the country who are not coming from a war-torn country at all, and they come across every other safe countries, and then they seek to claim either asylum or modern slavery in the UK? I have heard stories of Albanians who had gone to Germany, and the Germans have said, sorry, we're not letting you in. They have something like a 0% acceptance rate, whilst we have 55% acceptance rate. Why is it that the German authorities are saying, go to the UK because they will accept you? This is completely wrong. This is a £1 billion industry of lefty lawyers and those who like to showcase their zeal for altruism at the expense of everybody else that they should be representing. Maybe the Archbishop of Canterbury should be focusing on why most of his churches are becoming increasingly vacant, and maybe he should be also saying how many migrants he would be willing to take upon himself. You know, Arlene, the Prime Minister did make a commitment, and it's right that we get people out of hotels. But it isn't just about getting them out of hotels. It's about removing them from the country. And it's about making sure that those that are still here under consideration should be put in barracks or in other places, not comfortable places. They need to know that when they do come here, they are going to be removed very soon. So I'm going to be championing the Rwanda plan, so that because when we did implement it, Arlene, we had 3 weeks worth of no more boats coming to the United Kingdom. So I was told yesterday, Arlene, just yesterday, I had that dreaded email from the Home Office saying, in your constituency, we've identified a building that has been deemed as suitable for housing asylum seekers. And we have so many that we need to disperse across the country, and we'd like your feedback on this. I am serving notice on the Home Office right now. I'm going to go to war on the Home Office regarding this. It is a completely unsuitable place. I would look at them, tell them to look at the 2010 race riots that we had here in Dudley and the ones in 2015. Literally, Dudley was barricaded with steel walls everywhere. We had to have the Met Police come up from London, and not 100 yards from where these events took place, the Home Office is saying it's looking to house up to 144 illegal migrants. I just don't know who's making these decisions, but you can imagine the emails I've been firing off, including the Home Secretary and council leaders. So the council also need to be taking very rapid action on this, because I actually want to prevent this turning into a bloodbath, which it could.
Marco, thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us your views on the statement that came on Tuesday of this week around migration. Well, this week also saw a number of announcements made by backbench Conservative MPs. On Monday, Lord Cruddas and Priti Patel announced the creation of the Conservative Democratic Organisation to, in quotes, take back control, we've heard that before, of the party for its members. Almost simultaneously, a group of 40 MPs sent a letter to the Chancellor highlighting the size of the tax burden and the savings that could be made by defunding politically motivated campaigns. I'm delighted to say now joining me is the former party chairman, Sir Jake Berry. Jake, good to see you, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. Obviously, I want to talk to you about the disconnect some may see between the membership and MPs, but you were one of the signatories to this letter about the tax burden. Tell us why you felt it was necessary to send that letter to the Chancellor.
Well, for understandable reasons, because we're exiting the first global pandemic we've had for over a century. The tax burden is at its highest since the Second World War. And I think as Conservatives who believe in a low tax, high growth economy, we have to some extent put out there that while it's understandable that taxes temporarily are at this level as we tackle some great national endeavours, including restoring our NHS back to health, this cannot be a permanent normal. There can't be a sort of a COVID reset of government where taxes are at sort of Swedish style levels and civil servants are maintained at the number they were to tackle the first ever global pandemic for 100 years. That is not the way the Conservative Party should in the long term seek to govern our country.
Yeah, and Jake, you also associated yourself with this Defunding Politically Motivated Campaigns, which is a report by Conservative Way Forward, where there was a huge sum of money associated with being involved in some of these campaigns that we have come to know so much about, woke campaigns, as some people would call them. I mean, do you think there's a real need to tackle that in government as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Arlene. I think the thing I found myself saying to myself, actually, probably the only person who's listening more and more often, is when you get in politics to the point where you have to explain like it's something new, something completely obvious and common sense, that you know that you're in trouble. And of course, people at home watching you today and watching me will be thinking, you know, why are we paying taxes for people to go on woke courses in the Home Office, costing the government, according to that report, up to £150 million worth of lost staffing hours or man hours, as you may put it. Look, it is absolute common sense. We as taxpayers understand that the government needs our money to provide services. We do not intend paying taxpayers cash over to the government so it can go on some sort of woke crusade. And in all fairness, I don't think it's the government, it's the civil service. They can go on some sort of woke crusade to try and change the hearts and minds of ordinary, sensible thinking people.
I was laughing to myself there, Sir Jake, because I was thinking people won't like you saying man hours now. I mean, that'll be something that you'll have to go on a training course for. But in any event, I also wanted to briefly speak to you.
I've got lots of things on my list to do before Christmas, but going on a load of woke training courses isn't one of them.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine. Just before I let you go, obviously you're the most recent party chairman of the Conservative Party. Are you concerned that there's a disconnect between the membership, the general membership, the workers, the people that go out and canvass, and we know them all very well from whatever party they're from, they're the backbone of the party, and the people that are sitting in Westminster, representatives of the country? Do you think there's a bit of a disconnect there?
Well, people tell me I'm actually out, something you will have done for many of your Saturdays, leafleting with my team here in Rosendale and Darwin on Saturday. We're certainly still well connected. But look, I think the Conservative Party membership is naturally small c. It believes in low taxes. It believes we shouldn't be fostering this woke agenda. And I think if, we expect people to go out like I'll be doing tomorrow, knocking on doors and delivering leaflets, the government should reflect those values.
Sir Jake, thanks for joining me, and it's really good to have you on the programme. See you again soon.
Nice to see you.
Well, coming up now, Rishi Sunak has been meeting political leaders in Belfast during his first trip to Northern Ireland as Prime Minister. We'll go live to Belfast to get the latest from our reporter, Dougie. But first, here are your headlines.
Arlene, thank you. It's 2:33. Your top stories in the GB newsroom. Passengers travelling by train are being disrupted by a fresh round of strikes. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, the RMT, have walked off the job for 48 hours. That's after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay and conditions. Services across the UK are severely disrupted, with no trains at all running in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. A man has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 23 years for murdering his work colleague. Ross McCullum killed Megan Newborough at his parents' home in Colville in Leicestershire in August last year. He'd been dating the 23-year-old for less than a month. Her family said they're the ones serving the life sentence. The victims of a suspected triple murder in Northamptonshire have been named by police as Anju Asok and her two young children, Jiva and Janvi Saju. They were found with serious injuries at an address in Kettering yesterday morning. A 52-year-old man is being questioned in connection with their deaths. And 4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London. Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force their way into a concert. The Met Police has launched an investigation and plans to review CCTV images of the incident. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. It's back to the briefing with Arlene in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the briefing. Well, the Prime Minister has made his first visit to Northern Ireland. Yesterday, he met with all of the parties at a time when efforts are being made to break the power-sharing impasse. Today, Rishi Sunak has visited the Belfast shipyard, where the Ministry of Defence have recently awarded a contract to return shipbuilding to Northern Ireland for the first time in 2 decades. Well, joining me now from Belfast is GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. Dougie, these visits, when they happen, are always very tightly managed I don't suppose there was much substantive agreement or indeed discussion that took place in Belfast over this past couple of hours.
No, I mean there's been a lot of movement and talks outside of Belfast, basically with the EU. There's been a lot of posturing. I mean, the Foreign Secretary spent time yesterday with Maros Sefcovic, the EU negotiator, and of course Ursula von der Leyen was in Dublin last week. Now this weekend, of course, we see the end of the Taoiseach. That's handed over from Micheál Martin to Leo Varadkar, and he, of course, was one of the people that ran around with the photographs of violent damage to border posts and said this would return if the protocol was not enforced, if there wasn't a border on Northern Ireland. So that protocol brought down the government in Northern Ireland. Unionists, as you know, do not support the protocol because it brings them away from the union. Rishi Sunak arrived here yesterday evening, spoke with all the parties. They all came out and said that it was good to meet him. It was good time to have that sort of talk. And Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, leader of the DUP, had this to say.
Clear at the moment, given the limitations of their negotiating mandate, that we're just not in the space where a deal can be delivered that really addresses the fundamental issues, and that for us means restoring Northern Ireland's place within the UK internal market.
Well, you can hear from Sir Geoffrey. He's not really in the mood for negotiating. He says it's not there, and you can see why. The court case yesterday in Belfast ruled that ministers in Stormont behind us had to enforce the protocol, and that came about because the Minister of Agriculture that was in charge of the checks, those border posts from the RAC coming in, tried to stop that happening. There was a judicial review. That has now come out and said, no, ministers here must enforce the protocol. Unionists are now saying, well, there's no sense in sitting in this government behind us if they have to enforce something that keeps them in the EU. Quite basically, what they're saying is their nationality has been changed without their consent because they're having to enforce laws that aren't British laws. And if we look at the shipyard today, you can see there that those ships that are coming in there, if they are enforcing the protocol, that leaves Northern Ireland inside the EU. There's a number of questions with that. Will those ships with British steel on them have to pay 25% tariffs on that steel? Will the white goods that come in, will they have to pay European tariffs on them? Will there be competition laws coming out of it where this should have went out to tender inside the EU? It leaves lots of things up in the air, and businesses and hauliers have been ringing me on a regular basis and talking to me about the problems that they are having with the protocol and the damage that it's doing to Northern Ireland's economy. Now, earlier on in the week, NISRA released some of their figures. There's no real minutiae in those figures of where everything has gone. It's very, very loosely based, and people here want to see the very detail of what they are talking about. What was the uptake on cross-border trade? What was it that we were buying? What was different? And nobody seems to be answering those questions, and press conferences and visits like this are so tightly managed, you cannot get to the bottom of all these questions. And unionism is coming under the most pressure of any of the parties to get back to government. And it has got to the point now where that push, I think, is just going to end the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the court in Belfast made it clear that Northern Ireland is now outside of the United Kingdom when it comes to goods coming across, and of course that causes a great deal of problems for us in Northern Ireland. But Dougie, thank you for coming in live there from a sunny Stormont, but no doubt a cold Belfast as well. Thanks very much. Well, now, the Iran protests have been going for 3 months as of today. Unrest was sparked following the tragic death of 22-year-old Masha Amini, who died after being detained by Iran's morality police. Nearly 500 people have been killed in the unrest so far, and thousands have been arrested. Last week, Iranian authorities carried out executions linked to the civil unrest. And there are now concerns about the welfare of 26-year-old footballer Amir Nasser Azadini, who has also been sentenced to death. Joining me now to discuss this very serious issue and the protests is Daulat Nowrozi, the UK representative of the National Council of Resistance in Iran. Daulat, it's been very concerning what's been going on in Iran over this past 3 months. Of course, we have been watching as people have been coming out and they have been protesting, but now the resulting arrests and executions, you must be very, very concerned about it.
Absolutely. The Iranian community, both outside Iran as well as particularly vast majority, especially women and the youth, families of the victims, particularly, as you may know, during the past 3 months, over 30,000 protesters have been arbitrarily arrested by this very inhumane regime. During the protest, people very clearly chanted the slogans, "Down with dictator, down with Khamenei." They said his rule and his regime is a murderer. Khamenei is a murderer. His rule is illegitimate. We all know that the judicial system of the mullahs regime are not in any way at all complying with the international standards and norms. Any of the commitment of this regime towards the conventions or international law is just futile. I mean, nothing is being really applied and implemented. They all know particularly arbitrary executions are going on, especially against protesters and political prisoners, as well as all the people that in any way express their view and opinion against the repression. You should know that vast majority are condemning the atrocities because none of the so-called judgment of the courts of this regime are really legitimate. The Chief Justice of the regime, Prosecutor General, and the Chief Justice of the Judiciary acknowledged himself that they don't even have a primary school education, let alone talking about them going to any lower school and being graduated from there. If I may say, even Raisi, the president of the mullahs regime, has only 6th grade education. And can you believe such a people are talking about a legal system that will justify ruling against protesters that demand their main fundamental basic rights, particularly women, their main freedom of choice, freedom of expression, freedom of education, and all other basic needs that any human being deserves. So the Iranian people...
I wanted to ask you, if I can, about the United Nations ruling very recently, and I know that it's something that you have been involved in as well, and the Commission on the Status of Women for the United Nations have decided to remove Iran from what is the premier women's body in the United Nations. Clearly, this is something that Iranian women had asked for. You must welcome that, and it's a good sign, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Our president-elect, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, who herself is a metallurgical engineer from Sharif University, a very prominent university in Iran and very well known. The president-elect very strongly welcomed the opposition and the Iranian resistance, admires the effort of international community in trying to expose the atrocities of the mullahs and especially implement urgent action. The Iranian people are pinning their hope on international community to stand with millions of them demanding a democratic republic. They have already clearly said no to repression and this misogynist regime. This recent resolution by the women's status and the ECOSOC of the United Nations, of course, is very for us valuable, but we hope and we demand that it sort of actually involves other agencies of the United Nations. This regime must be expelled from the United Nations because they do not represent Iranian people. Over 700 people up to now have been murdered, 61 of them women, 70 of them youth and below the age of 18, actually children. Nobody supports a regime clearly in Iran that kills youngsters, kills teenagers, kills children, and then they want to justify it in the name of religion. Everybody knows in Iran this has nothing to do with no religion.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're running out of time, Darla, so we're going to have to stop there. But I really appreciate you coming on the show to tell us about what's happening in Iran. And it's interesting to see the Foreign Secretary tweeting today to say that the UK has sanctioned 40 Iranian officials since the dreadful death of Mahsa 3 months ago. So, again, the UK are acting as well. Darla, thank you so much for coming on the show. Well, it's been a tumultuous year in politics. I think we can all agree on that. 3 prime ministers, 4 chancellors and hundreds of official visits. The year is nearly over, but there have been many memorable moments captured by the cameras. Joining me in the studio now is Chief Political Photographer of the Press Association, Stefan. It's good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you,
Arlene. Thank you for coming in. We're going to look at some photographs now from the year. I think it's important that we remember, my goodness, so much has happened during the year.
I know. Who'd have thought weed be where we are now at the start of the year? I mean,
my goodness, exactly. Well, the first photograph we're going to look at is a photograph of the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He's on a plane. Where was that to?
This is on the way. This is on the way to India, and I picked this this picture because the Prime Minister, whenever he goes on foreign trips, always briefs journalists, talks to them. They have a huddle, they call it, on the plane. But in the past, in the 20 years I've been travelling with the Prime Minister, I've never been able to photograph this. And his people said, yeah, you can take a picture this time. And it just makes this great picture. But, you know, all the journalists are very much listening. But what was important is when I this picture went out on our wire service, and I tweeted it. It got so much interaction, especially from people from India and journalists from India, because they said, I wish our Prime Minister would see this, because he doesn't speak to the media directly. He would never hold a briefing like this with journalists so close and talk to them direct. And so I thought that was very important.
And you know what? A lot of people say our prime ministers are very managed now, and I just said it today about Rishi Sunak, actually, when he was in Northern Ireland, and it's very tightly managed. And of course it's tightly managed. But I think this shows shows actually that our politicians are very much in touch with journalists.
Oh, completely. And I'm like you, I've moaned about it in the past about access, and control.
Yeah.
But actually, there's not many people, this is, he's very accessible.
Yeah.
And to have journalists, and they can ask about anything at all,
And I think it's very interesting. There's no notes in front of Boris, he's just talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Chatting to the journalists as well.
Yeah.
And your second photograph is of Boris as well.
Well, this is on said trip to India. This is in Ahmedabad, the first place we went. And this is just a classic Boris picture, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
He was good value for photographs for us. And this is arriving at a university. And it's kind of a welcoming ceremony, but this would only happen to Boris. They wrapped his head in a turban, but it just kind of got all mangled. And he just goes with it, I mean, anybody else would have been ushered out the way, I think, by advisors. Oh, no, this is going wrong. Let's try and get the photographers out the way. But, I mean, he just thrived on it.
He loved it. And I think that colour from Boris will be sadly missed, I think, because a lot of people enjoyed
he was quite unique.
The fun side of him as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So the next picture is a totally different picture, and it's the contest between Liz Truss and Rishi
Sunak. The first contest we had through the summer, if you remember. And this is when it was announced who'd won the campaign at the beginning of September, that first contest. And this is the announcement when it gets announced by Sir Graham Brady of the 1922 committee who's won. And they said, now I remember photographing in 2019 Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson, if you remember, sitting at the front in exactly the same situation. And when it was announced that Boris had won, he got up, shook hands with Jeremy Hunt, and it was quite a feisty campaign, that one. But they shook hands, and he got up on stage and made his acceptance speech. What was quite noticeable here is they kept his chair in between them, oddly. And there was no interaction.
Was that Graham Brady's chair? I presume it was.
It wasn't, actually. He came straight on stage.
Okay. All right.
And so it was just, nobody sat there, and they just didn't look at each other at all. I mean, certainly Liz Truss didn't look to Rishi Sunak. And when
she would have known then that she had...
Yeah, they're told before. And then when she got up to take the stand and make her speech, she didn't turn to shake his hand at all, and I thought it was very noticeable, because it'd been quite a...
Spiky, I called it.
It had, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at this picture, the next picture that you've brought in for us, and there's Therese Coffey standing in the rain.
Well, this is just quite a fun picture, because this is we're waiting for Liz Truss. This is the following day, so she gets announced as leader of the Conservative Party on I think it was a Monday. Tuesday, she goes to see the Queen, comes back and comes into Downing Street to make her first speech on the steps of number 10. But just before she arrived, it absolutely threw it down. Torrential rain. Her staff, and if you may, Theresa Coffey was her sort of campaign manager.
Yes, and Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, absolutely. And the skies opened, and to the point at which I think they told Liz Truss to go around the block a few times to wait for the rain to ease off.
Chap on the right, he looks completely soaked, and he's just standing there ramrod straight. The next photograph we're looking at is a joyous photograph. It's one of Liz Truss when she's out and about during her short tenure with...
Well, quite. I think I only did 2 visits with her. This is during the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham to a building site. And everything seems quite good. If you remember, the relationship between her and her Chancellor started to break down after that.
Yeah.
But this is just one of those great photo ops that we wait for on these visits.
And the next one is one of change, Rishi Sunak and the 1922.
Exactly, yeah. Now, if you remember, all the votes, each time somebody was knocked out of a campaign, Sir Graham Brady would announce it in one of the committee rooms in the Houses of Parliament. The day that I think all the candidates dropped out on the second campaign and just allowed Rishi to take it. And I talked him into letting me in to do a picture of them all in this committee room. They're so grand, and it was just that was the first picture of him as Prime Minister.
Goodness me. And your last 2 pictures I enjoyed because the first one is of President Macron walking towards the new Prime Minister. My goodness.
He actually broke into a jog.
So keen to see him.
No, absolutely. This is at the COP summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it was our first meeting as Sunak as Prime Minister. And he came around the corner, and they literally sort of, Macron certainly ran towards.
Absolutely brilliant.
Sunak.
Well, I wish we had more time to look at more of your photographs, because I really enjoy them. But you've been watching and listening to The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster. The show's back every Friday from 2 p.m. I'll see you next week, and I might even wear a sparkly top.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. It's been snowing heavily across some parts of Scotland. That is now starting to ease. For most, it is a dry and a cold day once more. Milder weather, though, is on the way, courtesy of an area of low pressure out in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, it's still cold. We've got high pressure, bringing most places a dry day today, but this low up to the northwest, and these weather fronts have introduced quite a bit of wet weather to western Scotland. Still snowing heavily across just to the north of the central belt through the hills here, and elsewhere at lower levels turning more back to rain, but still things could be quite icy and still, as I say, some snow to come. Much of northern Scotland dry, the odd shower for northern parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, but for most it's dry, sunny and cold, with temperatures again struggling to get much above freezing. Now, as we go through the evening, we'll see more of this wet weather pushing into southern Scotland and then sinking southwards. Again, mostly rain at low levels, but some snow over the southern uplands, the Cumbrian mountains, and by the end of the night into parts of the Pennines as well. Further south, again, most places dry. Cold once more, widespread hard frost. Southeast England, East Anglia, rural spots and northeast Scotland could get to negative double figures once more. So another cold day to come tomorrow, a cold Saturday with some wet weather over northern England and North Wales. Again, mostly at low levels this will be rain, but some snow over the hills and it could be icy. So just bear that in mind, especially on those trans-Pennine routes. More snow showers over the Highlands also. Elsewhere, much of the south and much of the east will be dry and bright on Saturday, but another cold day. That is about to change, though, because low pressure systems coming in from the southwest are going to mix things up through this weekend. Going to bring much milder air, certainly, but also going to bring some wet weather too. And as that wet weather hits the cold air initially, on Sunday, for a time, there could be some snow and it could be icy, and then things turn wet and windy into next week.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories